So picture this. It is 1999. You are literally the face of the biggest movie franchise on planet Earth.
Right. Star Wars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The red carpet for the global premiere of Star Wars Episode 1 is waiting for you. I mean, the world's media is there, flashbulbs are going off, George Lucas is standing there.
Huge deal.
And you just no-show. You skip your own global premiere to study for your high school final exams.
Which is just wild to think about.
I know, right? Most people in the entertainment industry would call that absolute career suicide. But Natalie Portman, well, she called it an insurance policy.
It is honestly one of the most fascinating flexes in modern pop culture history. I mean, we are just so conditioned to this predictable trajectory of young fame, you know?
For sure.
The culture basically demands that young actors, and especially young women, just sacrifice their entire developmental phase to feed the content machine.
You give up your privacy, your education.
Exactly. You surrender your autonomy in exchange for access to the A-list. But the life and career of Natalie Portman, it provides this incredibly rigorous counter-narrative.
It really does. Because when you look at the research and the biographical data tracing her path, I mean, from child star to Harvard graduate to Oscar winner, and then ultimately to this woman who is redefining her own joy after a very public heartbreak.
It doesn't read like a standard Hollywood biography at all.
No, not at all. It reads way more like a masterclass in defensive psychology.
Because it is. I mean, she didn't just survive the machinery of fame, she actively analyzed it. She understood how extractive it was, and she built this highly sophisticated intellectual fortress to neutralize it.
Right.
She basically treated her own life as a research project in maintaining agency.
So if you're listening and you're trying to figure out how to balance your own professional ambitions with your private life, or maybe you're just looking for a blueprint on how to reinvent yourself after a major setback, this deep dive is packed with these unexpected aha moments.
It really is.
So let's look at the very beginning, because this methodology, this fortress, it starts taking shape almost immediately.
Right, going all the way back to her childhood.
Yeah. So she's born Natalie Hirschlag in Jerusalem in 1981, and her family moves to Long Island. And when she is just 11 years old, she's sitting in a local pizza parlor.
As 11-year-olds do.
Right. And this representative from Revlon spots her and literally offers her a modeling contract on the spot.
Which, for most kids, would be the dream.
Exactly. Most 11-year-olds would be absolutely thrilled. But she turns it down. She opts to pursue acting instead. And within a year, she lands the lead of the Luc Besson film, Leon the Professional, at age 12.
And that rejection of the modeling contract, it's such a crucial piece of early data because, modeling is entirely about the passive gaze.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, you are being paid explicitly to be looked at, right? To be the static object of consumption. And even at 11, she instinctively pivoted toward a medium that required action and voice and internal motivation.
That is so perceptive for a kid.
Right. But she also understood the danger of exposing her true self to that gaze. And that is exactly why, before the movie even comes out, she adopts her grandmother's maiden name, Portman.
So she's basically establishing a data privacy protocol before she even really has a public profile.
Exactly.
She completely separated the commodity, Natalie Portman, from the actual human being, Natalie Hirschlag.
It created a psychological firewall. But the thing is, that firewall was tested immediately. The reaction to Leon was profoundly disturbing.
Oh, it was awful. Critics and audiences heavily sexualized this 12-year-old girl.
Yeah. And she actually spoke about this at the 2018 Women's March. She looked back at that period and she categorized the letters, the media commentary, the industry pressure she faced at age 13. She literally called it sexual terrorism.
Wow. I mean, it forces you to look at how society consumes youth, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
When a culture looks at a child and immediately tries to strip them of their safety, how does that brain adapt? If you are a highly analytical 13-year-old experiencing that kind of intrusion, what is your survival mechanism?
You make yourself untouchable.
Oh.
Her psychological adaptation was to weaponize her intellect. If the industry wanted to reduce her to a physical object, well, she was going to force them to deal with a formidable mind.
Man, she really did.
Yeah, she spent the entire next decade meticulously selecting roles that proved her depth. And simultaneously, she was treating academia as her true priority.
So it wasn't just like an escape.
No, she wasn't just hiding in books. She was building this alternative value system where Hollywood's opinions simply did not matter.
I have to say, though, I kind of struggled to buy that this was a masterstroke of strategy at the time.
Why is that?
Well, stepping away from the spotlight in 1999 to go to Harvard, that wasn't exactly seen as building a fortress. I mean, in that era of Hollywood, the attention economy was brutal.
That's very true.
If you stepped away, you simply stopped existing. The industry just moved on to the next person. So wasn't she just incredibly lucky that her career survived that kind of academic detour?
I mean, it definitely looks like a massive risk if you view it through the lens of someone who's desperate to stay famous. But the strategy worked precisely because her apathy was genuine.
Oh, interesting.
It's like she shorted the Hollywood attention economy. By intentionally restricting her own supply and making herself scarce through this rigorous academic study, she artificially drove up her own demand.
Wow. And she actually gave a quote at the time saying, "I'd rather be smart than a movie star."
And she absolutely backed it up with hard labor. She enrolled at Harvard to study psychology, and get this, she arranged to shoot the massive Star Wars prequels only during her summer vacation so she wouldn't miss class.
That is dedication.
It really is. This was not some PR stunt to look intellectual. She actually became a research assistant to Alan Dershowitz. She thrived in this highly adversarial, analytical environment.
And didn't she publish something too?
Yes. She co-authored a neuroscience paper on front lobe activation, and it was published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal.
That is wild. Meanwhile, her fame is literally haunting the Harvard campus.
Oh, the fan mail?
Yes. There was this entire group of underclass women who were also named Natalie, and they kept receiving her misdirected fan mail.
Right, they called themselves the Natalies, I think.
They did. It is just this bizarre juxtaposition. She is sitting in a library parsing complex neuroscience data, and she speaks conversational English, Hebrew, French, German, Arabic, Japanese, and Spanish.
Which is insane.
And while she's doing all of that, thousands of people are sending letters to a dorm room, hoping for a signed picture of a space queen.
The dichotomy is striking, for sure, but it proves the point. She was signaling to the entire industry that she was entirely self-reliant. Hollywood thrives on leverage, you know. Executives control actors by controlling their access to validation and wealth. But by securing a degree from Harvard, by proving she could excel in rigorous, peer-reviewed scientific research, she just removed Hollywood's leverage.
And ironically, not needing the industry made the industry obsessed with her.
Exactly.
So she builds this impenetrable academic and psychological fortress to prove she doesn't need them. But, intellectually understanding human behavior is one thing. Physically embodying it is another.
Right, which brings us to her acting process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How does someone who relies entirely on logic and control tackle a role that demands absolute chaotic surrender?
Well, you approach the chaos through the lens of research. And this is where we see the absolute apex of her methodology. We're talking about the 2010 Darren Aronofsky film, Black Swan.
Right. To prepare for the role of a ballerina descending into madness, she subjects herself to this staggering physical regimen. 12 months of ballet training.
8 hours a day.
8 hours a day, operating on a near-starvation diet, completely isolated herself from any social life. She actually dislocated a rib during filming and simply kept dancing.
The physical toll was horrific. But here's the thing, the physical transformation was only half the equation.
What was the other half?
While she is putting her body through this torturous discipline, she is simultaneously co-authoring another peer-reviewed scientific paper.
Wait, really? At the same time?
Yes. And this one was specifically studying the neuroscience of her character's psychology.
That detail is just mind-blowing. It's like an Olympic athlete winning a gold medal while casually publishing a thesis on the biomechanics of their winning jump at the exact same time. It almost doesn't compute.
I know, but it makes perfect sense when you consider her background. She used her Harvard-trained research skills to map the pathology of the character.
So she wasn't just acting.
Right. She wasn't just performing madness. She was clinically analyzing the synaptic breakdown of a mind under pressure and then translating that neurological research into physical choreography.
Wow.
It was the ultimate synthesis of her intellect and her physical craft.
And the industry obviously recognized that undeniable synthesis. She wins the 2011 Academy Award for Best Actress.
The first person born in the 1980s to win that specific Oscar, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that. And her acceptance speech is incredibly revealing, too. It wasn't this polished, overly managed PR speech you might expect from someone so controlled.
No, it was remarkably grounded.
She thanked unnamed camera operators, the crew, and she gave a very genuine shout-out to her co-star Mila Kunis, who she jokingly called Sweet Lips.
Yeah, because at that moment, the fortress had served its purpose. She had achieved the ultimate superlative the industry could offer. She leveraged her intellect to win the game on her own terms.
But Black Swan also delivered something entirely unscripted, didn't it? Something that fundamentally altered her trajectory.
Right. She meets the choreographer, Benjamin Millipede, on the set.
Now, the context here is a little complicated. He was living with his girlfriend at the time. But Portman and Millipede fell in love. They eventually got engaged and they had a child.
Which brings us to the next critical phase of her life. Having conquered the Hollywood ecosystem, she takes her ultimate prize, her new family, and initiates a tactical retreat.
They get married in 2012, and she physically removes herself from the epicenter of fame.
Yeah, they relocate to Paris so Millipede can take over as the artistic director of the Paris Opera Ballet.
And she deliberately scales back her A-list career to raise their kids, Aleph and Amalia. She takes on projects that fit around the school run, and she fully embraces this specific French cultural ideal.
How about très discrète thing?
Exactly. She told an interviewer that she valued being très discrète, very discreet, above absolutely everything else.
And if you think about it, this is the natural evolution of the 13-year-old girl who changed her name to protect her family. She had spent 2 decades meticulously curating a life to avoid being exploited or minimized.
Right.
In Paris, she had finally constructed the perfect, quiet, highly controlled environment. It was the ultimate private life for the ultimate private person.
But you can't peer review a marriage.
No, you cannot.
In early 2023, the fortress suffers a catastrophic breach. The French tabloid magazine Voiceover publishes a devastating expose.
Yeah, this was huge news.
They print photos showing her husband leaving his Paris office separately from a 25-year-old climate activist named Camille Etienne. They are photographed leaving just hours apart, and the implication is glaringly obvious. Wow. Sources close to Portman reported she was utterly crushed and humiliated. She attempted counseling to salvage the relationship, but ultimately she filed for divorce in July of 2023, and it was finalized the following February.
It is the exact nightmare scenario she spent her entire life trying to engineer her way out of.
Completely.
The private pain, the betrayal, being broadcast for public consumption and speculation, the very thing she feared at age 13 was happening to her at age 42.
And this is where I have to pause and ask you about the mechanics of PR and privacy. It feels like her superpower, that absolute control, was suddenly weaponized against her.
How do you mean?
Well, when your private humiliation is plastered across European tabloids, how do you maintain that discreet shield? Most public figures in that situation immediately release a no-tap statement on Instagram, or they leak favorable stories to TMZ to control the narrative.
Right. And that is exactly what the tabloid economy relies on.
Right.
It relies on the celebrity panicking and feeding the machine with a response. But Portman understood the sociological mechanics of a scandal. Her response was absolute, unyielding public silence.
She never cried in public. There were no tearful sit-down interviews on morning television.
Nope. She starved the algorithm of any new data.
That is so smart.
By refusing to give interviews, by refusing to weaponize the press against her ex-husband, she maintained her integrity and protected her children. Her silence was not a retreat. It was an active refusal to participate in the spectacle.
She really just shut it down. Her only comment on the entire ordeal was a single clinical sentence to Vanity Fair. She just said, "It's terrible. I have no desire to contribute to it."
It is an incredibly powerful boundary.
It really is. But, surviving a betrayal with your dignity intact is very different from actually healing.
That is very true.
And while she is quietly absorbing this blow behind closed doors, something completely surreal happens. The universe delivers this unscripted validation from the absolute last place you would expect.
You're talking about the January 2024 Dior Couture show.
Exactly. The divorce isn't even finalized yet. She is attending this fashion show in Paris, and Rihanna happens to be there.
Of all people.
Right. Now, Rihanna is famous for being unimpressed. She does not get starstruck.
Yeah.
But Rihanna spots Portman, and this completely unfiltered interaction is caught on camera, and it goes incredibly viral.
Oh, I remember this video.
Rihanna walks right up to her and declares, "I don't get excited about anybody, but I fucking love you. You're one of the hottest bitches in Hollywood forever."
Which is just the exact antithesis of the quiet, controlled, academic validation Portman usually seeks.
Completely.
It is loud, it's profane, and it's entirely visceral.
And it clearly short-circuited something in her brain in the best way possible. Portman later goes on Jimmy Fallon and speaks to Hoda Kotb, and she explicitly says that every single woman going through a divorce needs Rihanna to call them a bad bitch.
I mean, she's not wrong.
She described it as a formative moment and the confidence boost of a lifetime.
Because it offered a completely different kind of reflection. For a woman who had spent a year feeling minimized and publicly humiliated by her partner's actions, having an icon of unapologetic confidence reflect back her own power and desirability, that was profound.
It really bypassed the intellect.
Exactly. It bypassed the intellect and hit straight at the ego right when the ego is most battered.
And you can actually track the physical manifestation of that internal shift. Fast forward to October 2024 at the Ballon d'Or ceremony in Paris. She arrives to present the women's trophy.
Right.
She steps out in this striking Dior navy velvet dress. But the real statement is above the neck. The safe, elegant, highly managed long hair she has worn for years is just gone. She debuts this textured dark bob that lets her natural curls show.
In the context of her history, that haircut functions as a visual rebirth.
It really does.
It signifies the physical shedding of heavy, accumulated baggage.
You look at the photos of her from that night compared to the previous 2 years, and the contrast is genuinely staggering. She isn't just performing the role of a woman who's doing fine. The sources from the event noted a lightness to her step, a genuine spark.
It is exceedingly rare to observe a celebrity emerge from a highly publicized scandal looking completely unburdened.
Usually they look exhausted.
Right, the default outcome is that they merely look like they survived a war. But here, despite her ex-husband moving on publicly, she was radiating a genuine, self-generated happiness. It indicates a massive internal psychological shift. The armor was coming off.
And that lack of armor completely changed the way she interacts with the world. She stops hiding in the quiet corners of Paris and starts seeking out spaces of loud, unfiltered joy.
Which brings us to the unlikely world of professional football and London pubs.
Yes, spaces that demand presence rather than perfection. She is now a co-founder and co-owner of Angel City FC, which is a Los Angeles women's professional football club built on a really unique model of profit sharing and community ownership.
And when she attends these matches, she's not sitting quietly in a luxury suite performing polite golf claps for the cameras.
Not at all. She is down in the mix. She is on her feet, visibly delighted, screaming for the team, completely unself-conscious. She even flew all the way to Sydney in August 2023, right in the middle of her personal turmoil for the Women's World Cup Summit.
Wow.
She refers to the team as a primary source of excitement and joy.
It represents a space where she is allowed to simply feel rather than calculate. A sports crowd is an environment where collective emotion overrides individual scrutiny.
That makes a lot of sense.
For someone who has been scrutinized since age 11, disappearing into the joy of a crowd is a radical act of freedom.
And then we get the photos from May 2024. She is photographed standing outside Bar 69, which is a speakeasy in Islington, London. She is wearing a plain white t-shirt. She is smoking a cigarette. And she is laughing absolutely hysterically with the actor Paul Mescal.
Now, they are strictly friends, right?
Yes, strictly friends. She had previously interviewed him for a variety series and called him emotionally available, but the images themselves are what matter. They radiate this pure, unadulterated joy.
There is zero image management happening in those frames. No perfectly curated aesthetic, no consideration for the très discrète persona she previously guarded with her life.
When you see a celebrity laughing that hard outside a pub, the cynical assumption is that it is a carefully staged paparazzi setup orchestrated by a publicist, right?
Oh, absolutely. A manufactured attempt to say, look at me thriving.
But everything about her demeanor at the football games and smoking outside that pub feels entirely anti-PR. It looks like a woman who has fundamentally stopped needing to prove anything to anyone.
And that is the psychological breakthrough we are witnessing. Track the timeline. From the age of 13, following that initial wave of intense objectification, she meticulously curated every single data point of her life to avoid being exploited or hurt.
Right, the Harvard degree, the obsessive research.
The retreat to Paris, it was all about maintaining absolute control over her narrative and her safety.
But the control didn't stop the pain from happening.
Exactly. At 43, she survived the exact public humiliation she had spent 3 decades terrified of. And the profound realization is she survived it just fine.
Yeah.
The absolute worst case scenario occurred and she did not shatter. When you realize that you have the internal fortitude to survive the fire, you stop needing to live your life inside a fireproof bunker.
That is such a great way to put it.
She no longer needs to tightly control the narrative because she knows she can handle whatever reality throws at her. She is actively choosing to prioritize joy over image management.
And you see that shift reflected in her professional choices now, too. She's navigating, co-parenting her 2 children. She is taking on new projects like The Gallerist and Guy Ritchie's Fountain of Youth. But her selection criteria has fundamentally changed.
How so?
She recently told the actress Jenna Ortega that she now chooses roles purely because they envelop me in happiness. She is no longer chasing the academic validation or the Oscar. She is chasing the joy.
Which is the ultimate luxury, honestly, bought and paid for by decades of relentless discipline.
It really forces you to look at your own career and your own choices. I mean, we all have that instinct to overperform when we feel insecure or exposed. We all try to manage how other people perceive our failures and our successes.
For sure.
But her trajectory asks a really uncomfortable question. Are you building your resume and your life to actually satisfy yourself? Or are you just building a fortress to keep other people from judging you?
That's the core of it.
True power isn't about never getting hurt. It is about defining your own success and setting your own terms. Whether that means choosing to study for a high school test instead of walking a red carpet, or protecting your peace by remaining absolutely silent during a personal crisis.
Or simply allowing yourself to laugh wildly outside a London pub in a plain white tee.
Exactly. You have the right to choose joy over performing for the audience.
And this raises one final, important psychological question to leave you with. We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how Natalie Portman used rigorous research and intellect to control her narrative. She kept the world at arm's length by building this brilliant, impenetrable armor to protect her core self from an industry that wanted to consume her.
Okay.
But what if her ultimate triumph wasn't about successfully building that perfect armor at all?